What's up, everyone? Good morning. We love you all. Once again, thank you so very much for tuning in and worshiping with us today. For those of you that continue to invite people to our live and in-person services every Sunday at 9:30 and 11:15, thank you so very much for doing that. We have new people that show up every single week. Also, for those of you that continue to like and share our online worship experiences with your circle of influence, thank you so very much for doing that. We have people that are tuning in from all over the place, showing up from all over the place, and getting help with their heart and their life and their faith and their struggles and their storms and their walk with God. Also, for those of you that continue to worship with us online through a very beautiful and sacred and holy way to worship, and I always say that because it is, and this is this beautiful sacred way to worship, it's through giving and generosity. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that God gave up His only Son. When you love, you give. When we love God and God's church and the mission of God's church, we want to give back. And when you do that, when you worship with us through giving and generosity, you're allowing us to help more people, love more people, feed more people, minister to more people, serve more people, shelter more people, and show our city and our community the body of Christ and the love of God. Thank you so very much for doing that. Okay, so today we continue with our current series, and this series is called, Did Jesus Really Say That? You know, sometimes you and I can hear something that Jesus said or taught, and it can make us think and feel like, wow, that's amazing, or that's encouraging, or that's inspiring, or that's challenging, or that's comforting, or that's convicting. But sometimes we can read something that Jesus said, or we could hear something that Jesus taught, and it can be kind of confusing, like it doesn't make much sense. Jesus said that, but this is very difficult for me to understand. Jesus said that, but this is very difficult for me to comprehend. This doesn't make sense with the other things that Jesus said. Jesus said that, but how do I really apply this to my life? Because it doesn't seem to make sense to me. So in this series, this is what I want us to do. I want us to tackle a few of those teachings and a few of those words of Jesus. And I want us to find out what these teachings of Jesus really mean, how we can really understand them, and how we can really apply them to our life. And today I want to talk to you about something that may not make much sense to you until I can fully explain it to you in this message. And so I'm going to try my best to you today to explain to you what Jesus meant when He said something that seemed to be very out of the ordinary for Jesus. Now, you and I believe what we believe, and we believe what we believe about God and about the Bible. We believe what we believe about the world and about ourselves and about ethics and about other people because someone somewhere convinced us that this is the best way to believe. We believe what we believe because our environment and someone and something somewhere convinced us this is the best way to believe. And so our beliefs are molded and shaped by our past. Our beliefs are molded and shaped by our environments and by our experiences and by our family and by our church and by religion and by our education and by mentors. And the reason we settle on a belief is because we have settled on this. This is the best way to believe. But sometimes what we've been taught to believe is not accurate. Sometimes what we've been taught to believe is not that good at all. In my entire life, I grew up in church hearing about being completely surrendered to Jesus. My entire life, I grew up in church hearing about being completely sold out to Jesus. We would call it being on fire for Jesus, completely surrendered. I'm giving Jesus my all or nothing. I'm going to give Jesus total devotion. I would hear message after message after message. It was almost like the type of churches I grew up in. We were trying to out bold other people. We were trying to be more Christian than other people. Oh, you say that you love Jesus? I'm going to outdo your love and I'm going to be a bolder witness than you. I'm going to be more on fire for you. You say that you're on fire for Jesus? Well, I'm going to outdo you. It was like this really weird competition of who's more sold out to Jesus. And so I was always hearing these terms. You got to be sold out. You got to be on fire for Jesus. And the obvious implication was that you and I I was not, and we were not surrendered enough. We were not devoted enough. We were not radical for Jesus enough. We were not on fire for Jesus enough. We were not serious enough about Jesus. And so massive amounts of guilt and shame would just overwhelm me and overwhelm us and overwhelm most of the people that I went to church with. And honestly, these were good people. Good people of faith and good people that loved Jesus, but we were constantly made to feel like the way that we loved Jesus wasn't good enough. Have you ever been made to feel that way? That the way that you love God, the way that you love Jesus just isn't good enough? It's not good enough for other people. It's not good enough for your denomination. It's not good enough for your religion. It's not good enough for those fake standards. And the messages that we got from the church was that when you give your life to Jesus, that you give Him your entire life, and so we would try. That you completely sell out to Jesus, and so we would try. That you get on fire for Jesus, and you stay on fire for Jesus, and you get bold for Jesus, and you stay bold for Jesus, and so we would try. And so we would pray more than ever, and we would study more than ever, and we would worship more than ever, and we would tell people about Jesus more than ever, and we would meditate on Jesus more than ever, and we would go to church more than ever, and we would do all these things, and we would push ourselves as a Christian to be sold out, on fire for God, 100%. But then we would have a really bad day. We would have a bad moment. We would face a small failure. We would face a small storm, or we would have a big failure and a big storm. And then we would feel that guilt all over again, that crushing and overwhelming religious guilt that you tried to be sold out to Jesus. You tried to be devoted. You tried to be bold and on fire for Jesus, but you just couldn't do it. Maybe you didn't get it right. And then we would sit in another church service and hear another guilt-ridden message about how we're not surrendered enough. And so, man, we would run to the altar and try to rededicate our lives. That's what they called it. I want to rededicate my life. I want to re-surrender my life because I got to be on fire. I got to be sold out. I got to push and go. And so some of us would try again and again. And for a little while, we would do good again until we went through another difficult season in our life or faced another difficult storm or another difficult battle or weakness. And so some people would just give up and quit. I've known many people that just gave up and quit. I tried to have a relationship with Jesus. I tried to walk with God. I was too weak, and so I just quit church. I just couldn't do it. I felt like too much of a hypocrite. I've had so many people tell me that. I felt like too much of a hypocrite, and some people just walk away and quit. And this verse was used to make so many people feel too unworthy for God, not good enough for God, inadequate for God, useless to God, failures to God. And this verse was used, whether they realized it or not, to cause so many people just to think about giving up on their faith and walking away from their relationship with God. Not in rebellion, but because of discouragement and just feeling so beat down. And this is what it is. And notice these words of Jesus, Revelation chapter 3, verses 15 through 16. Jesus says, I know all the things that you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other, but since you are lukewarm, like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth or spew you out of my mouth or vomit you out of my mouth. And I remember hearing how these verses were explained. That Jesus either wants you cold, and cold represented completely outside of God's will. Just walk away from your relationship with God because you're not strong enough. He would rather you being cold and completely outside of His will, or hot, completely on fire and sold out and inside of His will. You just can't be in the middle. You just can't be lukewarm. You can't be trying to hold on to God with one hand and holding on to your weaknesses with another hand while you're trying to figure it out. You can't be in the middle. That makes Jesus want to puke. That makes Jesus want to spit you out of His mouth. Either get on fire for God and be hot and completely sell out, or just completely give up and walk away and be cold. Just stop being a hypocrite and just stop being in the middle and just stop being lukewarm. Do you remember us being taught that growing up? Because that's how it was put. And so for a lot of people I went to church with, or even myself at times, we went back and forth between these two different extremes. If I can't be hot for Jesus, if I can't be on fire for Jesus, if I can't be bold for Jesus, if I can't be radical for Jesus, if I can't be completely surrendered to Jesus, then I might as well just give up the whole thing and go back to my old ways. Stop trying to hang on to God and still hanging on to my struggles while I'm trying to figure it out. Man, just give up and walk away. God would rather you be cold and outside of His will, or hot and inside of His will and on fire. You just can't be in the middle. Back and forth from this extreme to that extreme. Now, let me just share my heart with you today. I think that following Jesus is the most peaceful way to live. I think it's the most enjoyable way to live. I think it has the most purpose and the most significance. I think it's the most forgiving, the most loving, and the most gracious. I think it's the most patient, and I think it's the kindest way to live. And my desire for me and my desire for you is to see all of us finish our race, to keep following Jesus. And this is what I mean. I want to see you follow Jesus now today, and I want to see all of us keep following Jesus until we take our last breath and our life is over. I want to see all of us follow Jesus for the rest of our life and finish our race. No more giving up. But you need to understand this today. Jesus will never tell you. Understand this. If you're still with me, say I'm still with you. Jesus will never tell you that if you're weak right now, if you feel weak right now, that He wants to have nothing to do with you. He'll never tell you that. He'll never tell you that if you're struggling right now and you can't give 100%, that He wants to have nothing to do with you and you make Him want to puke. He'll never say that to you. He'll never say that if you can't be completely on fire for Him right now, that He would rather you just give up and be cold and walk away if you cannot be completely. He will never say that to you. He's just calling us to take lifelong steps of growth and discipleship. I don't want you to ever attend our worship services or walk out of our church and feel more hopeless and more guilt and weak and not good enough for God, because you're going through a time in your life where you feel stuck in the middle. You feel stuck trying to get closer to Jesus, but you're struggling and you're hurting. You feel stuck trying to get closer to God, but you have this battle in your life. You feel stuck trying to grow in your relationship with Jesus and worship Jesus and serve Jesus, but you have this weakness in your life and this storm in your life. And I don't ever want you to think that because of that God's ready just to give up on you and spew you out of His mouth, and He's so frustrated with you, because that's not what this verse means, and that's not the truth at all. But that raises a question for us today. What was Jesus talking about when He says that He would rather us not live a lukewarm life, that He would want to spit that out of His mouth? What did that mean? What did hot mean? What did cold mean? Well, let's look at these verses again and figure it out. Once again, Revelation 3:15 through 16. Jesus says, I know all the things you do, that you're neither hot or cold. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you're lukewarm and neither hot or cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Now, it's important to understand that in Laodicea, and this is the church that Jesus was talking to, in Laodicea, you had 3 different pools. You had an ice cold spring pool on one side of the city, right outside of it, like a cold plunge, like an ice bath, ice cold. On the other side of the city, in the opposite direction, you had a hot spring pool filled with hot spring water. And then they had streams that flowed into the city together and made a third pool of lukewarm water. So you had an ice cold pool on this side of the city, a hot pool on this side of the city, and then in the middle of the city, where those 2 streams ran together, you had a lukewarm pool. Now, Obviously, 2,000 years ago, they didn't have modern medicine like we do today. You have a headache and you take some Tylenol or some Advil. And so they had to find and use natural ways to treat their sicknesses and their diseases and their pain. And both extremely cold pools of water, and we know this, and extremely hot pools of water had very, very good medical benefits and health benefits. The cold pool could help you reduce anxiety, reduce stress. It helps increase your mental awareness. It can heal your skin. It helps your blood circulation. It helps you breathe better, and it wakes you up. And then the hot pool could lower your blood sugar, lower your blood pressure. It could help your muscle and joint pain heal. It could relieve cold and flu symptoms, but the lukewarm pool was stagnant and it tasted awful and it was good for nothing. And so when Jesus said that he would rather us be cold or hot, just not lukewarm, this is what he did not mean. He did not mean that God would rather you be hot and surrendered and sold out and on fire for him. And if you can't do that, then he would rather you just walk away completely and be cold and completely live outside of his will. That is not what Jesus meant. And just don't ride the fence by being lukewarm. That's not what he meant here. Understand why that'll never make sense. Because God is better than that. First of all, God doesn't want anyone out of his will. The Bible makes that very clear. He wants everyone in his will because in his will we find love and hope and peace and purpose and significance. Secondly, God doesn't want to give up on anyone, and he will not. I have covered so many verses with us about how nothing can separate us from God's love. Nothing can pluck us out of God's hand. We are sealed with the Holy Spirit until the day of redemption. He will never leave us or forsake us. God is not interested in giving up on anyone or letting go of anyone. And lastly, God wants our entire life, and this is what I mean, the longevity of our life, the rest of our life to belong to Jesus. For some reason, we've gotten this all mixed up. When we say surrender your life to Jesus, we think right now, I have to surrender every thought, every impulse, every desire, every action, every reaction, everything about my life, completely surrender it to Jesus right now and never go back. And that is an impossibility. That's not what it means to surrender your life to God. When we talk about surrendering your life to God, we're talking about surrendering the rest of your life to God, the longevity of your life to Jesus. And so very quickly, let me point out a few ways that can help us understand what Jesus is saying right here to the Laodiceans and how we can apply it to our life. The first thing is this, and notice this today. Cold and hot are specifics. And what I mean by that is this. When something is cold, you know it. When something is hot, you know it. When something is lukewarm, you really don't know what it is. Cold is decided and steady and specific. Hot is decided and steady and specific. Lukewarm is just something that really doesn't know what it is. It's a mixture of both. And so in this passage, Jesus says there needs to be something that's steady and specific about our life. Also, cold and hot were very useful. Lukewarm was not useful. And so our life needs to be useful in the hands of God. The second thing is this. Lukewarm is not in between cold and hot. It is not the balance between cold and hot. Lukewarm is not in the middle of cold and hot. In this passage, cold and hot are not against each other. Let me say that again. In this passage, cold and hot are not against each other. They are both good in this passage. Why? Because they're both decided. They're both specific. They're both useful. Cold does not equal darkness in this passage, and hot does not equal holiness in this passage. Let me say that again. And lukewarm does not represent riding the fence in this passage. Let me say that again. In this passage, cold does not represent darkness and rebellion and walking away from God and outside of His will. And hot does not represent being totally surrendered to God. And lukewarm does not represent being a hypocrite and riding the fence. It represents someone who is steady and decided. When you're cold and hot, you are steady and decided. And what are you steady and decided about? That the rest of your life, no matter what, that the longevity of your life, no matter what, is going to belong to Jesus. When you're walking in steps of victory, your life belongs to Jesus. But when you fall flat on your face and you feel like a failure and you have massive mistakes and guilt and shame in your life, you're still going to get back up and follow Jesus. Why? Because you've given the rest of your life to Jesus. Lukewarm here does not mean someone who's riding the fence, holding on to God with one hand and holding on to the world or their weaknesses with the other hand. Lukewarm actually in this passage means this. And notice this today. If you're still with me, say I'm still with you. To be lukewarm means that you're always thinking about giving up because you feel guilty for not being able to keep a spiritual pace. And it's a false spiritual pace. But let me say that again. When you're lukewarm, you're always thinking about giving up on God because you feel so guilty for not being able to keep a spiritual pace. I didn't pray enough today. I must not be on fire. I didn't worship enough today. I must not be on fire for God. I didn't spend enough time with God today. I didn't tell enough people about Jesus today. I didn't show enough people God's grace today. I must not be on fire. I should just quit and give up. Lukewarm is actually when you have not decided. Lukewarm is when you have actually not decided that no matter what, the rest of your life is going to belong to following Jesus. Even when you have a failure, you're still going to get back up and follow Jesus. Lukewarm is when someone has a failure and they think, man, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I can't do this Jesus thing, and so I'm always thinking about giving up. Cold is decided. We have to be decided. Hot is decided. We have to be decided. The rest of my life, no matter what, is going to belong to Jesus. And then number 3, and notice this today, following Jesus is a journey, and journeys last a lifetime. When Jesus said in the New Testament, I want you to take up your cross and follow me and deny yourself, understand there were some key words there. Follow me with your life. That implies a journey. That implies always taking steps. It does not mean that if you can't give every weakness to Jesus right now, then just give up. If you can't give every storm to Jesus right now, then just give up. If you can't give every battle to Jesus right now, then just give up, because God would rather you be hot and on fire or cold and outside of the church and outside of His will. Just don't be in the middle and be lukewarm. That is not what this verse is saying. It means this, that Jesus wants the rest of your life to belong to Him. He wants the longevity of your life to belong to Him. He wants the remainder of your life to belong to Him, no matter what. No one can give God their all or nothing. And notice this today. Remember this. Jesus is calling you as a follower to just take steps. Being cold and hot means that you've decided to just keep taking steps with Jesus no matter what. I had a strong season in my life and I overcame my giants and I'm taking steps. But right now I feel defeated, but I'm going to keep getting back up again and I'm going to keep taking steps. Hot and cold is decided that no matter what, for the rest of my life, I'm going to keep walking with Jesus. And some of you may be saying, Tony, I can't overcome all of this right now. I can't defeat all of this right now. I can't deal with all of this right now. I can't give all of this up right now. I can't handle all of this right now. That's okay, because this is just a lifelong journey, so just keep taking steps with Jesus. Some days you can take more steps than others, but just keep taking steps. Take steps in your life, just don't give up. Take steps in your faith, just don't give up. Take steps in your worship, just don't give up. Take steps in growing your love to a greater love. Take steps in growing your grace into a greater grace. Take steps into growing your kindness and your patience into a greater kindness and a greater patience. Take steps into growing your discipleship into a greater discipleship. And take steps into growing your inner peace into a greater inner peace. The one thing we can't do is to give up. Just don't give up no matter what, because Jesus will never let you go. So when He said this, if you're lukewarm, it makes me want to spit you out of my mouth. I kind of want to give you an example. It's kind of like a coach who's always coaching a football team or a basketball team. And let's say that you have this one player that's always saying, I'm not good enough, coach. I don't know why I'm trying. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. Maybe I should quit. Maybe I should quit. I'm not good enough. And you spend time with that athlete and you spend spend time with that athlete and you try to make them better and you try to make them better, and they just keep saying, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm good enough to start. I don't think I'm good enough to play. Maybe I should just quit. Maybe I should just stop trying. When a coach has an athlete that's that way, the only thing you can do is just sit them on the bench because they're not useful, because they're always thinking about giving up. The people that you use are people that are decided that whether I make a good play or whether I make a bad play, I'm going to keep playing hard no matter what. And that's what Jesus was talking about. He doesn't mean that people who struggle makes him want to puke. He was simply saying, be steady and be useful. If you're always thinking about giving up, I got to sit you on the bench because I can't use you. So be cold, be extreme, be hot, be decided, be steady. Just be useful. And if you're struggling today, don't give up. Just get back up and keep going forward. Thank you so very much for hanging out with us today. Thank you so very much for tuning in. Now continue to stay tuned in for an amazing time of worship with the amazing Water's Edge worship team. We love you all, and we hope you have an amazing week, and we cannot wait to see you back next week.